The tension in Port Charles reaches a fever pitch as the final week of May unfolds, bringing a perfect storm of maternal fury, desperate alliances, and high-stakes romantic power plays that will alter the canvas for months to come. At the absolute center of this unfolding drama is the rapidly escalating crisis surrounding Rocco Falconeri and Britt Westbourne, whose sudden disappearance has sent shockwaves through the community and forced longtime rivals and former lovers into unexpected configurations. For Lulu Spencer, the reality of the situation is a crushing, suffocating weight that leaves her drowning in an ocean of self-reproach. It was Lulu who first set this dangerous train in motion, her mind clouded by an overwhelming desire to shield her son from the lingering, violent fallout of recent Port Charles tragedies. Her frantic preparations, the tightly packed suitcases hidden away, and the acquisition of fraudulent identification through her brother Ethan Lovett were all meant to be a controlled, calculated flight to safety under her own watchful eye. She had envisioned a quiet, temporary relocation where she could keep her son safe from the crossfire of the city's warring factions, never anticipating that her meticulously laid plans would backfire so catastrophically. Instead of executing a seamless escape with his mother, a deeply frustrated and confused Rocco discovered the hidden travel documents and interpreted them as a sign of complete instability, driving the boy directly into the arms of a similarly panicked Britt. Now that Rocco and Britt have vanished into thin air using those very same back-alley passports, Lulu is entirely consumed by the terrifying knowledge that her own desperate actions provided the exact vehicle for her son's disappearance, pushing him further into danger rather than pulling him away from it. This devastating realization forces a profound shift in the fractured relationship between Lulu and Dante Falconeri, who have spent weeks clashing bitterly over the proper way to raise and protect their son in an increasingly dangerous environment. Dante, maintaining his stance as a dedicated law enforcement officer and a fiercely protective father, had previously issued an ultimatum that Rocco would leave Port Charles over his dead body, setting up a seemingly impassable wall of hostility between the co-parents. However, the sheer terror of an empty bedroom and a cold trail leaves no room for personal grievances or ideological battles, forcing the estranged pair to establish a fragile but absolute truce. Sitting together amidst the remnants of the broken plans, Dante and Lulu finally come to a monumental agreement, recognizing that finding their son requires them to operate as a unified, seamless team rather than opposing forces. Dante swallows his anger and operational rigidity to listen to Lulu's insights into Rocco's mindset, while Lulu relies heavily on Dante's investigative instincts and resources to piece together a timeline of the flight. This hard-won parental alliance becomes the emotional anchor of the week as they commit themselves to an exhaustive, cross-border search, vowing to sweep aside every legal and personal barrier until Rocco is safely back on Port Charles soil, regardless of the cost to their own emotional well-being. While the frantic parents try to establish a starting point for their search, the legal machinery of the Port Charles Police Department swings into high gear under the leadership of Harrison Chase and the city's newest, sharp-witted investigator, Detective Joe Fitzpatrick. Joe, whose recent arrival has already shaken up the department's standard operating procedures, brings a fresh, unblinkered perspective to a case heavily weighed down by local politics and familial relationships. Chase and Joe waste no time in pursuing a hot, time-sensitive lead that materializes on the department's radar, suggesting a digital or physical footprint left behind during the initial stages of Britt and Rocco's escape. The two detectives engage in a high-intensity race against the clock, tracking surveillance footage, questioning transportation hubs, and analyzing recent communication logs to intercept the runaways before they can permanently slip across state lines or international borders. Joe's sharp, analytical approach perfectly complements Chase's deep knowledge of the local players, creating a formidable investigative duo determined to crack the flight path. The high-stakes pursuit carries immense pressure, as any delay could allow Britt to successfully embed herself and Rocco into a deep cover network, making recovery exponentially more difficult and leaving the department vulnerable to charges of incompetence from the highest offices in the city. Concurrently, the dark underbelly of Port Charles sees a massive realignment of power as the legendary mob boss Sonny prepares to wage a ruthless, calculated campaign against his latest and most volatile adversary, Jen Sidwell. Sonny, operating with the seasoned instincts of a survivalist who has defended his territory for decades, receives a massive strategic advantage in the form of high-level intelligence passed down from Brit just before she cut ties with the grid. This crucial phone tip reveals the grim reality of Sidwell's recent operations, specifically detailing how the ruthless international criminal murdered Professor Henry Hank Dalton and utilized a local associate named Pascal to execute a meticulous, comprehensive cover-up of the crime. Armed with this explosive information, Sonny immediately begins to formulate a counteroffensive, recognizing that the key to dismantling Sidwell's aggressive push into Port Charles lies in breaking the chain of loyalty surrounding him. Sonny lays out his chess pieces with chilling precision during a private, intense strategy session with Mayor Laura Collins, explaining that their most effective path forward is to locate Pascal and apply maximum pressure to force him to turn on his murderous employer. Laura, though perpetually conflicted about partnering with Sonny's brand of street justice, finds herself backed into a corner by the sheer scale of the threat Sidwell poses to the city's safety and economy, forcing her to carefully weigh the moral implications of Sonny's impending strike against the absolute necessity of neutralizing a foreign cartel leader. Unaware of the storm gathering just outside his perimeter, Jens Sidwell remains firmly entrenched at Windermere, using the historic Cassadine estate as a fortress from which he intends to dictate terms to the rest of the city. Sidwell, always looking for leverage and intellectual amusement, shares a striking, highly sophisticated new theory with Ava Jerome, who continues to navigate the treacherous waters of her current association with the dangerous mastermind. Sidwell's theory connects several seemingly disparate events in Port Charles, linking recent corporate maneuvers, street-level violence, and the movements of various prominent citizens into a single, cohesive narrative that suggests a larger conspiracy against his interests. Ava, a master manipulator in her own right, listens with a carefully schooled expression of fascination and support, all while internally calculating how this new theory affects her own survival and standing. She recognizes that Sidwell's sharp intellect makes him a double-edged sword, while his protection keeps her safe from certain immediate threats. His growing obsession with identifying and destroying his enemies means that a single misstep or perceived betrayal could easily turn his deadly focus directly onto her, making every conversation at Windermere a high-stakes gamble for her life. The ripples of these intersecting crises extend far into the domestic and romantic lives of other Port Charles residents, creating a dense web of emotional vulnerability and rising suspicions. At Bobby's, a somber and deeply moving interaction unfolds between Lucas Jones and his sister Carly Spencer, as Lucas continues to struggle with the profound grief and lingering trauma of losing Marco Rios. Marco, who tragically lost his life after proving his ultimate loyalty and bravery to Lucas, has left a massive void in the doctor's life, prompting a period of intense soul-searching and mourning. Carly, setting aside her own chaotic battles for a quiet moment, offers her brother a deep, unyielding reservoir of empathy and maternal comfort, validating his heartbreak while listening to his raw, unfiltered memories of a love cut short by violence. Yet even as Carly provides this essential emotional support to her brother, her own life remains a chaotic battleground, leading her to make an incredibly emotional, high-stakes plea to an undisclosed party. Whether this desperate appeal is aimed at Valentin Cassadine to halt an impending corporate disaster or directed at authorities to aid in the protection of her extended family, Carly's vulnerability underscores the sheer exhaustion felt by the city's matriarchs as they fight to keep their loved ones from drowning in the town's perpetual chaos. Meanwhile, the younger generation of Port Charles is forced to navigate their own profound emotional transformations in the wake of the citywide panic. At the center of this youth-focused drama is the gentle, artistic relationship between Emma Scorpio and Gio, the talented young violinist whose presence in Port Charles has become a source of comfort for many. Emma, carrying the heavy burden of her grandmother Anna Devaine's turbulent history and the current terror surrounding her cousin Rocco's disappearance, finds herself on the verge of an emotional breakdown. Gio, demonstrating a maturity and emotional intelligence far beyond his years, steps into the void to offer Emma a safe, quiet harbor, using his soothing presence and grounded perspective to console her through the darkest hours of the crisis. Their shared vulnerability fosters a deep, resonant connection between the two, highlighting how the ongoing sins and conflicts of the older generation continuously force the town's youth to find solace in each other's arms. This poignant theme is further mirrored in the lives of Christina Davis and Molly Lansing Davis, as Christina receives an earth-shattering piece of news that promises to completely redefine her trajectory, while Molly finds her own attempts to establish stability interrupted by a sudden, jarring development involving Cody Bell, proving that no relationship in Port Charles can remain untouched by the prevailing winds of drama. The domestic front is further complicated by a quiet but significant check-in over at the hospital, where Rick Lansing makes a deliberate, calculated move to visit Elizabeth Baldwin. Rick, whose return to the canvas always carries an undercurrent of complex motives and unresolved history, approaches Elizabeth under the guise of genuine concern for her well-being during these turbulent times. Elizabeth, a seasoned survivor of Port Charles's endless cycles of drama, receives Rick with a mixture of guarded caution and deep-seated weariness, well-schooled in the art of deciphering Rick's true intentions behind his charm. Their interaction serves as a powerful reminder of the deep, historical roots that bind the older generation of Port Charles, where past betrayals and long-dormant romances can easily be reawakened by a current crisis. As Rick probes for information regarding the hospital's status and the general welfare of her family, Elizabeth remains fiercely protective of her boundaries, refusing to let Rick's smooth demeanor dismantle the stability she has worked so hard to build for herself and her sons. As the midweek point approaches, the focus narrows significantly onto the agonizing plight of Trina Robinson, whose world is systematically dismantled by a series of devastating emotional blows. The first catalyst for Trina's impending heartbreak comes from Kai, who,